Welcome to Long Story Short, a series where big historical events and themes are explained in a concise way that does not sacrifice facts or analysis. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the rise of the Nazi regime. We will be analysing how the framework of the Weimar Republic, which emphasised democracy, civil rights and certain freedoms, was corrupted to form an oppressive, fascist dictatorship and police state. This was something which happened from within, which makes it all the more menacing. As I covered in my previous video, by January 1933, democracy in Germany was as good as obliterated. By the 30th of January, Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany, and in his cabinet there were also two other Nazis, Wilhelm Frick and Hermann Göring. The Nazis were now in a position where they had control in government, but their power was not absolute. The cabinet still had other political parties and Junkers within it. Most importantly, Hindenburg as president still held the most power. Hitler looked to change this through his sinister schemes, a process which historians call Nazification or Gleichschalten. The first thing that Hitler looked to do was to extend the Nazis' majority in the Reichstag, so he got Hindenburg to dissolve the Reichstag and call elections for the March. He hoped by doing this that the Nazis could push through legislation which would give him certain powers. But something happened. On the 27th of February 1933, the Reichstag building caught alight, and at the scene of the crime was Marinus van der Lubbe, a Dutch anarchist. There are many theories surrounding the events of the fire. Some even suspect Nazi involvement, but there is no doubt that the party spun the aftermath to their advantage. The Nazis were able to convince politicians and civil servants that the fire was a prelude to a wider attempt by the communists to overthrow the government. The next day, on the 28th of February, the Decree for the Protection of the People and State, also known as the Reichstag Fire Decree, was passed, the first step in creating the terror state. The decree suspended nearly all civil rights which were enshrined in the Weimar Constitution, such as freedoms of speech and movement. The decree not only immediately enabled communists and SPD members to be arrested en masse, the law remained a fundamental power of the Nazi police state, in which political rivals could be taken into so-called protective custody. The March elections were called soon after the Reichstag fire. The Nazis won 43.9% of the vote, which still was not the 50% majority which Hitler desired. The Centre Party itself still gained 77 seats, and the left wing, the SPD and the Communists, collectively gained 30%. But this did not matter. The Communist Party was soon banned after the election. The newly elected Reichstag met for the first time amid the charged atmosphere of intimidation, arrests, and the silencing of non-Nazis. During this meeting, they passed a key piece of legislation which underpinned the Nazi regime, but it was not done freely and democratically. Communist deputies were banned from parliament, and the SA, the Nazi paramilitary, surrounded the building which the Reichstag met in. On the 24th of March, the Enabling Act was passed by 444 votes to 97. It removed the last traces of democracy, essentially allowing Hitler to rule by chancellery decree. As Mary Fulbrook argues, law could be used to justify any arbitrary act of the regime, but this garb of legality, while reassuring to moderate middle-class Germans, did not preclude the use of violence and terror. It simply accompanied it. Hitler utilized the Enabling Act to further extend Nazi power and destroy aspects of democracy. Attempts were made to break down Germany's federal system with the appointing of of Reich governors in various states who reported back to Berlin. There also were attempts to bring the economy and labour under central control. Various Nazi bodies were created for professionals, such as teachers and lecturers. Trade unions were broken up too, brought under Nazi control through the German Labour Front. Persecution also began in 1933 with the law of the restoration of the professional civil service, as those who did not align with the bigoted and hateful Nazi ideology, such as Jewish people, communists and other political rivals, were removed from the civil service and other professional careers. Whilst this was occurring, Hermann Göring infiltrated the Prussian government, eliminated rivals, and restructured the law enforcement to form the Gestapo, the secret police. Heinrich Himmler also established the first concentration camp at Dachau. Both of these would become key aspects of the Nazi terror machine. A dual prong of legislation further sunk the poison roots of Nazism into Germany's political system. Firstly, the law against the establishment of new parties was passed in July 1933, which banned the creation of any new parties. The remaining political parties were soon dissolved, which in practice created a one-party state, something which became written into the law code, with the law to ensure the unity of party and state, passed in the December. Secondly, in the January of 1934, the Reichsrat, the upper chamber of Weimar's parliament, was abolished permanently too, which removed the last semblance of independent accountability. With institutions and laws changed, within Germany there still remained some opposition to the Nazis' power. Prominent members of the Junker were still mistrustful of the Nazis and held positions of authority. There also was some internal opposition in the form of the SA and their leader, Ernst Röhm, who called for a second revolution. Hitler's response was Operation Hummingbird, also known as the Night of the Long Knives. On the 30th of June 1934, Hitler and his allies set in motion the simultaneous killing of rivals, which lasted until the 2nd of July. During this campaign of murder, around 100 people were killed, including Kurt von Schleicher and Gregor Strasser. Attempts were also made to kill von Papen, which did not work, but the events intimidated him, so he resigned as Vice-Chancellor. Ernst Röhm was also executed, which left the SA to be absorbed into the SS. The final stage of the Nazi hijacking of Germany was the removal of Hindenburg and of the office of president. This happened with Hindenburg's death on the 2nd of August 1934. Hitler joined the roles of president and chancellor together for himself under the position of Führer, with the backing of the cabinet and army, and under the pretense of a plebiscite. On the 19th of August 1934, Hitler rose to become the supreme and unchallenged head of the German state. The bulk of Nazification was completed by 1934, and what was left behind was a Germany obliterated, remoulded into the Third Reich, an oppressive and despotic place where terror reigned supreme, persecution was unbridled, and death was the consequence for speaking out. Hi there, this concludes the Weimar Republic video series. I hope you found this video informative. Please consider subscribing to support the channel, or follow me on TikTok or Instagram, which I have linked below. Again, thank you so much for watching. I have been Our Historia, and until next time.